indicators of a good and healthy menstrual cycle? I think you touched on it a little bit, but we can get into the details now.
So I like to say the menstrual cycle is a time of peace, a time of joy. If you would have interviewed me last week when I wasn't on my cycle, my tone would probably be a little bit different. I'm calmer during my menstrual cycle. All the hormones that are coming in during this period should come to calm you, to reassure you that everything's going well in your body. For some of us that don't want to get pregnant right now, we're happy that that off-flow is here.
Oh, yes.
So your menstrual cycle should come regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual number of days is different from person to person. If you're in that age where you want to get pregnant, it's good to keep your menstrual cycle around that 28 to 32 day range. Mm-hmm. And yes, you can work with people like me to alter the number of days of your menstrual cycle. If you have a menstrual cycle that's, let's say, 25, 26 days, I'm not as concerned. If you're regularly at 25, 26, or 24 days, I'm not as concerned. But if you want to get pregnant, that's not ideal. You need a bit of a longer cycle. And I want to explain why. So after you ovulate, you need your lining to get thick so that the egg can implant in there. So what does that mean? The whole point of a menstrual cycle is so that you can have a baby. And when you bleed, you're shedding the lining of your endometrium. So you have, let's say, you have the vaginal opening. If you go all the way into the vagina, women, you should be if you stick your finger in there, you should know that area. If you stick your finger in there, you can feel all the way up is the cervix. And so there's like a little hole in that cervix, and that goes up to the endometrial lining. And so there are these walls around that cervix that are like this. And so those walls, they will thin during your period. So you're bleeding because there's thinning of that lining. It's becoming super, super thin. Okay. And so what happens during that 28 to 32 days is it's getting thicker again so that it can get thin, thick, thin. So that's just the cycle of the period. That's what the period is. And so if you want a fertilized egg to implant, it needs to be thick. So that's why a longer menstrual cycle is ideal. That way it can get nice and thick so that the egg can go in there. If you have a 24, 23 day cycle, it doesn't really get thick enough for that egg to go in there. So a healthy cycle, ideally you want to be as close to 30 days as possible. 28 days is good, 32 days is good, 27 is even okay. And so if you are coming on regularly and you're able to change a pad every 4 hours without it being super heavy, and you're feeling okay, you're feeling relaxed, you're not in pain, you're not breaking out, then that's a good cycle. And another thing that I also want everyone to note is a healthy menstrual cycle you will bleed for about 3 to 5 days. The women that bleed for 1 week, that's too long. So 3 to 5 days is that sweet spot. Even 5 days is long. You can have a little bit of spotting, but if you're actually full bleeding for 5 days, that's a bit long. You're losing a lot of blood that way. And furthermore, when you're going through that particular bleeding, there shouldn't be a lot of blood clots. So you'll see some women, you'll have thick pieces of tissue in there. There shouldn't be any thick piece of tissue in there. When you look at your pad, it should just be blood on there. No blood clots, no tissue. Those are signs of a serious issue.
Okay. Wow. So I should be thanking God that I have babies, because I had, before my daughter was born, my firstborn, I had a 21-day cycle.
So another thing that I wanted to clarify, and I know you know this, but some people don't. So when we talk about how many days are in the cycle, I'm talking about from the first day you bleed to the next time that you bleed. So some people will say, I have a 18-day cycle, but they're looking at the last day of bleeding until their period starts again. So I'm talking about day one. So I started bleeding yesterday, right? And yesterday was the 28th of July. And so when I start bleeding again, I'm going to bleed for the next couple of days. Let's say I'm going to stop bleeding on Saturday. I started Wednesday. Let's say I stop on Saturday. Then yesterday was day one of my cycle, not Saturday. So Wednesday was day one of my cycle until I start again. And so that is ideal. Of course, people have babies outside of that range, but we don't recommend that someone that has a very, very short cycle give birth. That could lead to other complications and other really after the pregnancy is what we're scared of. Is if someone has a short cycle like that, then it'll be difficult for them to go into menopause. A lot of times we see that those women have issues down the road after they have the baby, and increased postpartum depression and other issues as well. It happens. Some women can do it and they're perfectly fine. But we just try to minimize the risk of issues happening down the line.
Okay.
So what was your experience? Tell us, what was your experience?
Falling pregnant, you mean?
Were you trying?
Yes, I was. It took a little bit of time, and you know how it is when it's taken a little bit of time, you start to get anxious, you start to get stressed and things like that. So I attributed the failure to get pregnant at the time to all of those other variables. Then, that's my family in the background.
It's a beautiful noise.
Oh, yes. So then it just happened. I mean, when I stopped stressing, it just happened. I discovered I was pregnant. And then with my son, my second born, I had been on the implant contraception. Then I took it out because of major weight gain. And then I went on to the loop. And then I started to develop a crazy discharge, which I couldn't understand. And I took it out. And 2 months after going off birth control, that was it. Fell pregnant.
Nice.
Yeah. So shocking baby, and I wasn't ready for that. But hey, he's here, and we love him.
What's the age difference between the two? How old was the 4?
4 years.
Okay.
4 years.
Okay,
yes.
That's a big gap.
I was not trying to get pregnant. Actually, you know what? If God hadn't made that little boy appear, I wasn't gonna let it. So another question I want to ask, and I think this is a very, very pertinent question, especially for the Zimbabwean women, right? Right. Let's talk about JECO. In the sense of, for those of us who are not Zimbabwean, JECO is period pain for us Zimbabweans. There's this myth that if you share clothing, I know this is so not scientific, but anyway, I need to talk about it. If you share clothing when you don't have period pain, and then you share clothing with someone who does, it's contagious. And I will say, probably to just support it. For those of you who are there watching, thank you for being here. You can, if you've got any comments or questions, just put them in the comments there and we'll try and read them out as best as we can. So for me, when I started my period, I was really young. I think I was 11 years old, right? And Mrs. Flo came. She wasn't dramatic. I was confused about what was happening. It was there. Then I went to school. I would have my regular flow, 3 days, I'm done, no pain. I was great. Then someone asked, when you're in boarding school and we have events, someone asked to borrow my clothes. And I was like, okay, fine, wear something, my pants. And the moment they came back, dude, I have had consistent period pain ever since then. So you can go ahead and give us your answer.
How do I answer this? I tend to not answer things that are not scientifically proven.
Yeah.
So, as much as I want to doubt that this is true, it's an experience that you have gone through, and I don't want to discredit your experience with it.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna have to say that my personal feeling is that is very unlikely, but I don't have the science. Everything that I speak is scientifically proven. So I have never done a study on it. I've never seen a study.